Bienvenidos a esta nueva conversación que tendremos en TV Senado, aquí en el Centro de Extensión del Instituto Nacional, donde estamos celebrando Congreso Futuro 2025, esta 14ª edición, donde conversamos sobre qué humanidad queremos ser. Con nuestra gran cantidad de invitados hemos podido pasar desde las ciencias naturales, ciencias sociales, la filosofía y también la ética. Y eso es justamente lo que nos trae hoy este episodio de este especial de Congreso Futuro. Solo recordarles que pueden visitar también las redes sociales y toda la página web de TV Senado para revivir algunas de las charlas que han pasado, como la que pasó el día lunes con Monique Morrow. Se las presento. Monique Morrow fue la directora de tecnología de la Oficina de Tecnología de Cisco, una de las empresas tecnológicas más grandes del mundo, y actualmente es presidenta y directora y fundadora, de Humanized Internet, que se preocupa de luchar por la igualdad en el Internet. Así que de eso vamos a estar conversando, de cómo avanzamos con la ética. Monique, it's a pleasure to be here with you. Welcome to TV Senado, to Congreso Futuro.
Thank you so very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
It's fascinating to have the opportunity to talk with one of the greatest persons in the Internet and working in such a huge companies, and especially devoted to the ethics, so make a better digital world. So.
Yes, indeed. I mean, this is, first of all, I'm humbled to be here, as I said before, but it is a great opportunity to have this dialogue about how it is to build a better digital world bounded by ethics around it. So, yes, that is correct.
You've been working in technology for several years, so I would like to start there. How you get into this world and how has changed sorry, I will start again with the question. So, what drives you to the world of technology and how it changed? So now you are facing these issues of ethical questions.
So I'm an accidental engineer.
Yes,
I wanted to be a diplomat, so that's why I have various degrees in various areas. But what drove me eventually, being in technology for many years, is to look at what we need to understand in terms of these emerging technologies and how we create an ethical boundary around them. I think it's a perfect opportunity to do this, because we have this polarity between industry, where you have to get business out very early with these technologies, without perhaps thinking about what the possible risks could be. And I think that's where we have to look at that, and here in the Congreso Futuro is an opportunity to have that debate.
Exactly, that debate between the technology, the companies, and the legislation and all that.
Correct.
You were leading one of the greatest companies in the world of technology. So what were the major challenges at that time, and what you learned from that process at Cisco?
Yeah, I worked in private industry for many years. So I started in many years when I working at Advanced Micro Devices, or for example at Cisco Systems, or companies that have been really good companies. In the end, they have been and are continue to be. What I find out, but in general in private industry, is the question about. I think the challenge they have is short-term outlook to make a profit or revenue, versus what could be, as they take these technologies together, could be the concerns around safety and around what it means for the citizens overall. And I do believe strongly that we should have a partnership across these industries, across these organizations together, to include the government.
That's great. You mentioned already to build a secure environment.
Yes.
For people, sometimes when you mention about digital security and all that, you say, yeah, maybe they want to hack me or they want my passwords, but you are not only considering those effects, others, like ethical issues. Could you mention what you mean when you talk about a safe environment in the digital world?
Well, safety. I mean, particularly right now, the risks are... Let me just say this. My speech was all about the what could be positive, right? But if the risks are very high when it talks about, when we look at, fake news, or your voice is no longer your voice, or you can be no longer you. Or these are, and we're seeing these presentations today. You're presented in a different way, but it's not you. So the stakes are high when we're talking about the misuse of these technologies. Just as you have a pack of cigarettes that says it could cause cancer, we have the right, people in general, technologists, citizens, need to understand how these technologies are being used and for what purpose.
And how can you regulate this? Because sometimes you need new technologies, you need innovation, you need to move forward the industry, right? And we see the benefits. How can we manage these two things?
You need a balance. Because if you overregulate, you don't have the innovation you need. So sometimes what I believe, and this is really what is so cool about the Congreso Futuro, is that you can take a government and along a journey. You can take officials along a journey. Because they need to understand what it is they need to regulate, but they need to do it in a partnership way such that it's not going to stifle the innovation that is needed. Right? So it's a balance to do that. The danger when you overregulate is that you will not allow that innovation to happen. What's important, the question to ask is, what are the safety issues associated? What are the concerns that would be associated, if I'm a senator, to my constituents in where I live? What are the safety issues? What are the safety issues regard to business? Those are the questions to ask and to take them along the journey. And sometimes it means also bringing along new courses, new scenarios that are great for the government.
Yeah, definitely regulations is something really important. You mentioned it's a risk you want to be innovative and all that. And usually what happens is that technology moves at a fast pace compared to legislation, right? It's hard to... How can we keep that pace and still build a better future in the digital world?
Excellent question. It's moving at an exponential pace. Perhaps it's always been exponential. We're just not aware of it. Yeah. And so the question about how can we be ahead? I think to be ahead is to have, I would believe platforms like this is really important. I think it's also to have platforms specific to government officials to keep them ahead. What about quantum security? What is coming now, in terms of compute? What is coming now in terms of how it's going to affect the... If I look at artificial intelligence, I give you an example of artificial intelligence. It takes a lot of energy.
Yes.
And if you're building energy, you have the Andes Mountains here. You have, how are you going to use that? It takes a lot of power. So those are the questions that need to be asked fundamentally. But then it talks about the security of the country. So quantum security is a big topic now, because that takes into effect of how your passwords are passed, encryption, and so on. And I think it's great to have maybe, I'll take a little examples of what I'll call cafe with the senators, maybe on a one-on-one, to just have presentations for them so that they understand that, maybe it's more intimate for them to understand. It's never going to be, you're never going to be totally ahead of the curve, but at least understand what that curve looks like.
Yeah, totally. That's something we need to do. And you mentioned several things that probably seem very abstract, like quantum computer security and all that. And they are happening now, but we don't have quantum computers in our homes. Probably there are a few years to go to reach that point. But in general, what things or what technologies should be worrying now in terms of security? What are the main things that you foresee in the near future will be the keys that we need to regulate?
Sure. So let me build a stack for you. I think we need to understand cybersecurity. Fundamental. There's not enough cybersecurity professional. With whatever technology, artificial intelligence or large language learning models, we need to understand where those models are learning. Maybe it's on social media. So we need to understand how privacy works. So you build that stack higher. And then I think cybersecurity, privacy are going to be very, very important at its base. And that puts together AI, blockchain, and all of the other, I call them ingredients in a cake. And if you have that together, then you can start to build a stack of what is the priority. So the priority is always going to be, from my perspective, a cybersecurity perspective. Because no matter what you're doing with AI, even what's automated will always be automated. But it'll create some other possibilities. That's what I'm saying. But cybersecurity are going to be fundamental, and privacy fundamental in your stack as a business.
Totally. I totally get that, and I hope people also learns a bit more about this.
Yes.
And in this process, probably one that is key is legislators and people making the law usually responds to what the people demands sometimes, right? In that regard, how important do you think it's the digital literacy, or that normal people get to know what are the rights in the digital world?
Yeah, I mean, the digital literacy is so important. I've had a very lovely time traveling in the country, and I think when I listen to the kinds of questions and the questions you're asking, it is important that digital literacy become key. Whether how you build a web stack or how do you build web. Some people don't have the opportunity to go to college or to a university, but they want to know the basics, and that will create more jobs. So closing that digital literacy, my argument, will actually be closing any kind of economic gaps or digital divide gaps that you will have. So I think it's about instilling programs. You could think about it through the universities, how they could instill programs regionally within the country to close those gaps out. And it also means involving people from diverse backgrounds to be part of that dialogue. So that's one group, one way to instill close the gap of digital literacy. I see this globally. I really do, and I think I really strongly believe that we have every opportunity to do that in a way that is going to be scalable for you all.
So that actually answered my next question. How can we bridge these inequalities? You were mentioning those. So is it important, or would you consider that guaranteeing the access to everyone is one key part? It's more important than this, or we should guaranteeing access to information, or another path to reach this digital literacy?
Okay, so you live in a country where 90% of, or I think circa 90% of the people have internet access. Maybe. I think it's quite a big penetration of access, so congratulations. But I think it's not just access, it's more of what are you putting down in terms of programs? Yeah. What could all the telecom, the great companies here, telecom companies can do to actually start to instill those types of programs together? Maybe they could have a cybersecurity program for people. Mm-hmm. I live in a country that they did. I'm a customer of a provider, and they're always asking me, do you want to do this or do you want to do that? So they're reaching out on a proactive basis would be a way to do that. You could also think about instilling in high school students who are very eager, not just the college students, or high school students, very eager to actually go and have a program where going to maybe you give them credits for college or whatever to actually start developing this closure of the digital divide. For example, if I go to talk to my grandmother, you bring it for your abuelos together, and they want to know how to use it. A lot of them do. Yeah. Want to know how to, or you to go to any kind of. I think you can do that possibly. It's for me. And I always say for Chile, it's the art of the possible. Yeah, the art of the possible.
I have several questions, but we need to do a short break. So sure. With me, and we'll come back in a few minutes. Vamos a una pequeña pausa. Recordarles que estamos conversando aquí con Monique Morrow, exdirectora de tecnología de Cisco y actualmente presidenta de la Fundación de Internet Humanizado, Humanized Internet, en Congreso Futuro 2025, este especial de TV Senado. Nos vemos en unos minutos. Estamos de vuelta ya en este especial de conversaciones aquí en Congreso Futuro 2025. Estamos en el Centro de Extensión del Instituto Nacional, donde estamos celebrando esta verdadera fiesta de las ciencias con más de 100 expositores, y recordarles que todas las charlas las pueden encontrar en las redes y página web de TV Senado, ahí en tv.senado.cl. Así que, y en congresofuturo.cl también las pueden buscar. En esta ocasión estábamos conversando con Monique Morrow sobre tecnología, sobre cómo hacer estos ambientes un lugar seguro y también sobre ciberseguridad. Así que, Monique Morrow,
Yes.
thank you for staying here. We discussed a lot about digital literacy and security, and you mentioned a few things that were really interesting to me, and I wanted to leave them for this segment.
Let's go for it.
You mentioned blockchain. A lot
Yes.
of people may have heard about cryptocurrency and blockchain maybe, and they see it's the only application is this currency. What does it mean, blockchain, and why is it important that we know what it is?
Well, I don't think so. One thing I will say is, yes, I do work in blockchain, but like anything else, these are ingredients in a cake. I would argue that the only application is crypto. It's not. It can actually be proving, for example, that what you've done is referenceable in blockchain. Let me say, I like to understand what I don't know, so I went off and got a master's degree in blockchain and digital currency at the University of Nicosia, and I graduated in 2019 while working full-time. So, master's degree in science. I think the way it works is that, and being involved, for example, I am on the board of Hedera, which is a group that's enterprise-centric, where they are involved in this. You know, big, large enterprises, whether they are, and colleges, they're looking at it from a point of perspective of use cases. You know, the types of use cases that could be run, whether it's healthcare, whether it's third-party trust relationships, and transportation and so on. So there's all kinds of use cases around it. So blockchain for me is extremely interesting, because the example I gave is, although I received this beautiful certificate diploma by a credentialing university, what happens if it goes out of business? Well, I could reference it on the blockchain. It's referenceable. And that's important, because there's other things that could be referenceable, like my university degree, like my experience. So that's an example of how we could use blockchain, not just for crypto, although crypto is coming up or has been kind of the funding, but not just.
So it's a safety measure, or you can use it for safety as well. For safety reasons, I mean.
About blockchain, safety reasons.
Yeah.
Well, I think blockchain, so one of the things that is really interesting about safety is that you can actually, with blockchain, reference the trust models.
Yeah.
And on the chain. So you could ask, what would be my alternative? And my alternative would be an Excel sheet. Yeah. Excel sheet, really? No. An SQL database? No. You really want to see it very, very automated. And you will see it pass through exchanges of cryptographic keys that are only known to you and to a party that you trust.
Yeah, that was very clear. Thanks for clarifying all these concepts that might seem a little bit abstract for some. I want to go to a little different topic, and one you mentioned during your talk. You were talking about, you asked your first question, who is an AI lawyer in the audience? Yes. And then you mentioned that AI and technology are creating new employments or new areas of work. Can you explain a little bit more about this?
Yeah, I mean, and by the way, when I asked the question, there was one woman in the audience who raised her hand. Yeah. And from that question, there were law students who came up and said, how do I study to be a... So in my opinion, new professions will be developed. Just as we're talking about outer space lawyers, right? So that would be an example. The thing of it that you need to think about is, how do you create a sandbox for, in the case of law, where you have a technology group within the legal firm that is actually looking at these technologies and then looking at what it means for their business or for their clients. And so, what would be the risks that they have to take on? Those are some of the examples. If it's automated, maybe they don't need a paralegal anymore. That's kind of questionable. So people get concerned about what should the paralegal do, and maybe the paralegal switches into another area and learns more about the technology itself. So deep down, that's an example of where you can think about creating new professions from these examples, and also creating, I think, out of Chile, a standardization for certification, like they do International Association of Privacy Professionals on AI governance, where lawyers or anybody else can take, and you don't have to have a degree.
Well, you just mentioned Chile in that regard. How do you see? A lot of people is afraid that AI or new technologies will drive away people, and you're mentioning no, it will create some other new people. How?
No, I think, there's one course that makes it dystopian, like a nightmare, but there's another course. Your university students are demonstrating this now, the use of it. The youth is they're already using it, so you cannot ignore it, right? You need to know how to tame it, and I think it's more that. It doesn't have to be your nightmare, but it needs to be bounded by the safety, the AI governance, ethics at a national level that gets down also to the universities, to the companies to develop from, and to make sure that anything that comes out of a business or out of a school that's taught. Besides, university students need to be taught about good use of these technologies. And so, and I think that's a great opportunity, particularly in my opinion, for Chile.
But considering the case of Chile, you probably already noticed you travel along Chile. You know it's a very long country. Is it hard? You need to invest a lot on this. What would be your words for the decision makers in this regard?
Yes, for the decision makers, there has to be an investment. It has to be public-private. So it's not just by the government. It has to be also with private industry together. If it were by private industry would have their own interest, which is natural. But I think public-private, and I would include also the wonderful network of universities to be involved in it so that they can create the programs and maps. So that investment has to take place, and that has to take place at a particular level, not only about the digital divide, but also making sure that ethics in AI or ethics in these new technologies is actually taught at an early age and applied to that. Any company that actually seeks to have business will actually be able to show that they're doing this.
That's a massive change, or a massive change in education, in infrastructure and everything. It sounds like a challenge. In that case, I would like maybe to ask, is there a roadmap for inclusive AI and the internet in this? Because this is infrastructure, but you talked about education and forming new professionals. Is this in parallel with the technology itself?
They go together, in my opinion. That was the whole notion of how I presented, because you have the infrastructure here, but you also have to make sure, and by the way, the companies are already using this. They're already using these particular technologies, AI, large language learning models, in addition to how they're trying to upgrade their internet services, like public service, which you have now decided that you're enacting. So that would be an example of that type of investment. So for example, the person, I know this by my own example, you have a trouble with your access at home, then you're interacting with a chat GPT bot, and then at some point in time you want to interact with a human because it's not getting solved.
Definitely.
So we need to be able to work at which level we'll get that solved for services. So they do go hand in hand, and that's an example of how they do it.
Thanks for the answer. That's very, very clear. You worked your life basically on emerging technologies.
Yes.
So what emerging technologies excite you the most today, and think you have a huge potential to impact our lives?
Oh, we're talking about it now. So we're talking about this whole intersection between various facets of AI and agentic AI, and we'll talk about the whole notion of all facets of it, and blockchain. But now we don't use the term blockchain anymore. It's digital. You'll call it a type of digital chain, right? So we call it like a DLT, so digital technology, right? So you have now DLT, all forms of blockchain, and you have all forms of AI coming together. That becomes important. But I don't discount what I talked about in the future. In the beginning of our conversation is really about cybersecurity. So although we'll have these types of chains or side chains or whatever, what's important is that they're going to intersect and they're going to create new businesses. But on the other hand, we have to make sure before it gets way ahead that we have some safety involved in it.
Definitely. You mentioned before we go away very far, you coined or you pushed a term that is the humanized internet.
Yes.
I'd like to have the opportunity to please explain a little bit more on this. What's your vision on this humanized internet, which is not human?
Right. So I'm coming out with a book that was over a 5-6 year project this year. So the human has to be in the loop. We think we can debate. You're not a robot. I'm not a robot. There's the robot behind us, but that is the factor that whatever we do, we don't use these technologies as a crutch to question them, right? So just because we may use distributed ledger technology, DLT, like various blockchains, or just because we use various AI formats, it comes out, if you're doing research or whatever, it comes out that you shouldn't believe it. You should challenge it. You should say, okay, I don't understand that, and be able to have it humanized. Now, that's the human in the loop. But there's also the part, if you look at our website, which is also bringing in the ethical aspects of it. And we also have a political component of it, which is about the effect on democracy.
Thanks. I have one last question for you.
I think you have
many.
Muchas preguntas.
Yeah, but this Congreso Futuro, actually, the topic of the year is what humanity do we want to become or do we want to be? What humanity you dream of?
The humanity I dream of is how I ended my presentation. I really believe that we should be embracing a future of what we want to have together, not the one we want to avoid. And that is my humanity, that we can actually coexist with these sets of technologies, such that it becomes a little more equally spread. So that's how I would leave it.
I love to have some hope words. Thanks very much, Monique, for being here at TV Senado at Congreso Futuro.
Thank you very much.
Con eso terminamos esta conversación junto a Monique Morrow, quien es directora fundadora de Humanized Internet y también que fue directora de tecnología de Cisco. Estamos en Congreso Futuro 2025, donde nos preguntamos qué humanidad queremos ser, y hemos tenido increíbles charlas de distintas partes del mundo, distintos expositores con distintos recorridos, que los invitamos a que puedan revivir a través de todas las plataformas de TV Senado y también de congresofuturo.cl, donde pueden acceder a toda esta información. Les damos las muchas gracias y nos vemos en una próxima entrega en estas conversaciones de Congreso Futuro 2025.